we need to strive to be something different. We need to just stop glorifying relationship dynamics that will most likely turn toxic. Or, at the bare minimum, boring, uncomfortable, and just expected. Because there's nothing more soul killing than being in a relationship with somebody because it was the next step. We call it being a placeholder now. Most men get married because you were there when they wanted to settle down. If they weren't ready to settle down, they would have walked right on past you. That's not trying to be cruel. That's just the reality of dating straight men. They date and marry the woman who is there when they're ready. Not because you're the one, not because you're his dream girl. It's because he was ready to settle down. And that's why he doesn't respect you. Even though he should. That's why I'm against the institution of marriage. There is no equality in marriage. Biblical marriage is a nightmare. Polygamy. The roles of biblical marriage are dehumanizing, cruel, and insidious. We need to stop creating marriages, and we need to stop glorifying acts and decisions adults make in utter ignorance. The idea that a man is in charge because of his gender, and that he's most qualified to lead, and that he has the final say, is dehumanizing. This kind of relationship is what a parent has with a child. Parents have the final say, not children, and apparently not wives. And these men view their wives as property, biblical property. And if you are in some ways boring enough, straight enough, and pure enough to be considered wife material, I don't know what to tell you. It's transactional. That's what marriage is. It's always been transactional. And nobody that I've ever met has met their partner's expectations. I honestly think people settle. Straight men hate women. They're probably not attracted to women. They have to be or justify themselves so they can get through 40 years of misery. But real men don't use women as beards or because they're too cowardly or a toddler to admit they're not attracted to women. I think the worst way is to live a lie. And let's be honest here. The respectability of marriage is a lie. It is one of the most disturbing secrets of marriage. I can count on my fingers the family members, especially women, who endured decades of boredom and just neglect, distasteful behavior, cheating, and emotional disengagement because their husband settled for them because they were ready and not because they deserved her. Women find out too late that midnight comes, the slipper falls off, and the dress vanishes. The idea of marriage is not reality. It's a fantasy. And that fantasy kills hundreds or thousands of women every year. And we need to make sure that no-fault divorce stays the law forever, because women are already trapped with open no-fault divorce. Can you imagine how many women will be shackled to pieces of crap the rest of their life? And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of crappy women out there. It's just not as common as the way men do it. 94% of violent aggressors are men who identify as heterosexual and straight. 53% of them are white, cis, heterosexual men. Which is probably why Trump does that. It makes so much sense. And we just need to reject that marriage is the chief relationship, the most important choice, it will determine your entire life, because it doesn't. The average marriage lasts 11 years. If the average person, women 25, 27, by the time you realize the first marriage was a lie, you're just about ready to hit 40. You've wasted half of your young life on a fantasy. Because every time you see marriage and proposals in a movie, it's a fantasy. It's not real. Some people beat the odds and get lucky. It's not because they made the right decisions. Occasionally, sometimes it is. It's because they just happened to find somebody who was compatible enough that it made it. And a lot of times, relationships last and survive because the woman gives up everything. And it's not fair. That's why I'm not married. I refuse to live my life for anybody but myself. I refuse to give up my dreams, my pursuits, my hobbies, my career. I refuse to lose out on anything because of a man or because of society's stupid expectations. Do you think the women that adhered to these toxic standards are happy? They're only smiling because they don't know they're trapped. And if they do, they have to smile because then it's awkward if they don't. Luckily, half the women out there have realized in America that having children just isn't worth the trouble. And if our population drops 30%, well, it's fewer men to hide from, in my opinion. So it's not a bad thing. If instead of being about 350 million, we drop to 300 million in 20 years, that's great. I'd rather have fewer people who turn out to be good than more people with the possibility of some bad people, like more bad people. Losing some population is not a bad thing as long as it's a natural process, because women choose themselves, not because people shoot at people. That's terrible. So we need to reject the church's worship of marriage. We need to see marriage for what it is. It's a fantasy that white male privileged men and enabling ignorant women pursue and push on the younger generation to maintain their privilege. Because that's what marriage is, social privilege. It's not about being happy, and biblical marriage has never been about being happy. Marriage has never been about love until 1840, when Queen Victoria married Prince Albert. Before that, nobody wore white wedding dresses. Nobody wore veils. Nobody had Christmas trees in Britain. And love was never anything that had to do with marriage before Queen Victoria. Marriage was about selling a woman for breeding purposes. That's it. And for gaining money and exchanging property. We call them dowries. And in some places, they call them bride prices, which sounds so dehumanizing. Luckily, my family gave money, so African girls in certain places like Kenya and Uganda could go to school and had a greater chance of skipping out on certain marriages and not being educated. I mean, the more access to education, quality health care, food and water you have, the more likelihood a woman can get into a relationship later in life without a great power imbalance involved. And that is a great thing. The longer you wait into your 30s, you slash a great percentage of your relationship failing because your brain is developed, you have a life that doesn't center around men, and men and children should never be the center of your life. They should be things you add to it that you can live without, but make your life better. If your partner doesn't make you the best version of yourself, doesn't support you, be your biggest cheerleader, biggest partner with support, who doesn't build you up with words and runs alongside of you, getting you where you need to go. They're not your partner. They're slowly sucking the life out of you for their own benefit. And just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it's toxic. Sometimes people find out you want different things, you're not compatible, you change careers, or perhaps it just wasn't long term. And sometimes there is no reason. You just don't want to pursue anything anymore. That's perfectly fine. There are people out there, about 82 million, or approximately 1% of the population, that are asexual. Some asexual people don't want to get married. Some people want marriage without the sexual part. Some people like sporadic sexual experience. Unfortunately, when you're in high control fundamentalist Christianity, they don't acknowledge asexuals exist. They don't acknowledge anything but Stepford nuclear family dynamics, which is extremely white supremacist and sexist and moving toward domestic violence dynamics. It's terrifying. And yes, I've worked with women who were killed, shot through restraining orders. Women who could not have certain jobs because they didn't want their face on the internet, because their boyfriend was stalking them and put GPS trackers under their car. Relationships aren't mandatory. You're whole without a relationship, and you may or may not be whole in one, depending on how bad or how good your partner is. If you're not whole before you get in a relationship, maybe you need to go to therapy instead of starting in a relationship. Because if you don't validate yourself, you don't develop self-control and self-confidence and create boundaries, you're probably more of an unfortunate liability than you are a positive green flag partner material. And with the sub-messaging that our culture gives women, I don't expect any woman to have a clue what makes a good partner, because television sure doesn't portray it. Very rarely does it ever portray something that isn't toxic.